You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Boy, do we have a lot and then some to dive into this evening, all the way from fraud scandals and an alert from the Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding terror threats out in California to the surf and turf scandal that is less surf and turf and more of a nothing burger, all the way over to what we're going to begin with, something that you do need to be aware of right away. And this would be an arrest made in Long Island this afternoon. This is according to the New York Post. We're going to go ahead and before we pull up the video, here is the photo of these three individuals. As they're called a trio of Salvadoran nationals. And they have been released due to unworkable bail laws. So a crew of immigrants were caught driving erratically in an early morning traffic stop on Long Island this week, according to the New York Post, only to be released without bail. So this would be yesterday, not today. Excuse me, they were released today. Suffolk County Police pulled over a 2008 Honda Accord that was allegedly driving erratically shortly before 2:30 a.m. Tuesday on Lexington Avenue. And the department made the case that the officer walks up to the vehicle, looks inside and sees what rolling around in the back seat? Honest to God, molotov cocktails, gasoline in glass bottles with rag wicks stuffed into the neck of the bottle. Here's the video from the New York Post kind of showing the individuals as they are released.
What are you guys going to do with those molotov cocktails? What are you going to do?
So to recap right here, we have individuals in this country who are rolling around with IEDs, with Molotov cocktails, and an entire group of individuals, because of their policies, for example, in New York, where they are releasing some of these individuals back out on the streets because New York has really progressive Democrat, silly laws about bail, which is insane. That is insane. There are growing terror threats all over all the time. And the media refuses, unless it's in this case the New York Post, refuses to cover in any way, shape, or form the growing trend in extra-national terror threats. Now, we're going to get into this regarding CNN. We talked a little bit yesterday about Abby Phillips making a very bizarre claim that, forgetting to mention that the two ISIS Islamist terrorists who shouted Allahu Akbar and threw IEDs filled with shrapnel at the anti-Mamdani, anti-Islamic culture protesters. She obscured all of that and also went after a bunch of individuals later for suggesting that after a couple of repeat Islamic terror attacks and extra-national terror attacks, that maybe, that there might be kind of a cultural issue here. She doesn't understand that. Other Democrats as well, all the way over to Gavin Newsom of California, are taking another very, very bizarre approach to security. So first of all, there was an alert in February of 2026. So not today. I know there's been a lot of speculation over on the social media side of things, but the FBI in February of 2026, based on information acquired in the first couple of days of February 2026. So this is not after the beginning of the United States Operation Epic Fury in Iran. The FBI warned that Iran had allegedly aspired to conduct a surprise attack using unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, launched from an unidentified vessel off of the United States West Coast, specifically targeting unspecified locations in California. One of the reasons that we learned of this report is that there was a police department in California that published a series of information bulletins given to it by the federal government. And a journalist sounded the alarm and said, oh no, Iran is going to strike the west coast of the United States. Not necessarily, but there are prior communications suggesting that there are Iranian-based or Iranian-sympathetic boats that might be carrying some type of an unmanned aerial vehicle, a suicide drone, from the Iranian regime. Now, originally, this was framed as some kind of a potential retaliation if the United States conducted military strikes against Iran, then this means, oh, there's going to be a bunch of terror strikes here. I'm going to let you in on a little secret that the majority of Americans, according to the polling, clearly understand. Iran and radical Islamic powers in the world are going to do these things anyway. The silly, hyper-libertarian, Rand Paul, head up his own rear kinds of philosophy, in which you suggested if you just leave everyone else alone, they'll leave you alone, have forgotten that the first big action of the Islamic civilization was to rape and conquer most of North Africa and Europe. Some cultures, ask the Japanese how many times they had to beat back, or sit back and watch a tornado beat back, the hordes of conquering forces from mainland Asia. Some cultures are indeed naturally expansionist, militaristic, and do in fact impose their cultures, whether you like that or not. Now, let me give you a few of the details on this particular plot uncovered by the FBI involving drones launched from a particular ship off shore. So ABC News has reported that it's not really known if this would be a military ship. We do. There are shipping container, international shipping craft that it has long been suspected could be the staging ground for some light drone attacks that would strike infrastructure. There are prior attacks in other parts of the world in which this has been accomplished. This has long been a concern of many in the United States in case we ever enter some kind of a conflict with China. There's no additional information on timing, specific method, confirmed perpetrators, execution status, but officials did stress this is precautionary intelligence. So even though it's not an imminent, credible, confirmed threat, it's coming for you right now, there is an element of understanding, a rationale of genuine safety and circumspection that needs to be communicated to the American people. Two things. No matter what some angry Karen tells you, if this is racist or xenophobic, if you see something, say something. If you see someone acting suspicious, if you see something that is suspicious, I don't care if you're in rural Kansas. I don't care if you're outside of our affiliate station in Little Rock. I don't care if you're in North Dakota, New York City, Nebraska, or in a different country but still allies with the United States. You're in Canada, you're in Nova Scotia. You call it in and report it. It is crucial because minutes matter when you have terror attacks that are popping up all over the Western Hemisphere. And as we talked about yesterday, Birmingham in the United Kingdom, that if you are simply a pro-people of Iran, anti-regime protester, groups of Islamists are assaulting Sunni and some Shia Muslims who are celebrating the fall of the regime in Iran. Now that brings us to the Iranian war, and we have some breaking updates for you. So for the first time in this war so far, the bulk of the drone activity, these being suspected MQ-9 Reaper drones, we don't have a lot of footage of these, so I can't confirm it for you, have been seen and heard flying over what are now considered regional targets. So no longer do we have drones that are loitering over all of the suspected ballistic missile sites. Many of those have been turned into beautiful smoldering slag. Instead, you can see here, or you can hear here, I should say, drones which are loitering and striking various IRGC and Basij regional personnel. Essentially what this means is that there are several checkpoints that are being used by the IRGC to hinder any kind of transportation from civilians in Iran from one area to another area. And these IRGC checkpoints have been thought of as secondary targets because, after all, the President of the United States has said, stay in your homes, don't do anything right now, you don't have any guns, unless you're the Kurds, which we've already talked about. So what do? Well, in order to begin facilitating the next stage of the operation, you have to begin striking the IRGC checkpoints. Now, as a quick reminder, and I know there are a lot of bots, this has been a major report in the last couple of days, that Iran has gone all in on a bunch of AI slop about, oh, this is all about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, the secret plot. And you can always tell because these AI accounts or these bot accounts have the English skills of a Pennsylvania CDL driver. But in this particular instance, what we do have confirmed via not just friendly to the American sources, but also, let's say, not so friendly, the Al Jazeera style networks reporting as well, we have completely destroyed Iran's radar capabilities, all of their surface-to-air missile and anti-air abilities, the entire Iranian Air Force, the entire Iranian Navy, what is estimated to be 80% of their ballistic missile capacity. Their first supreme leader, Ayatollah al-Khamenei, at least the leg of his son, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini, who has still not been seen in public at all, anywhere, anytime, anywho, anyhow. And most of the major IRGC leaders in Tehran. The United States did release an announcement today. U.S. forces urged civilians in Iran to immediately avoid all port facilities where the Iranian naval forces, or what's left of them, are operating. That's according to U.S. Central Command. The reason that's important, these two particular updates are crucial. The United States is no longer doing some of the initial strikes that we may have seen last year during the Fordo strike, Operation Midnight Hammer, or even the 12-Day War when a lot of things were levied at Tehran. Instead, right now here in the United States abroad, it appears the military is focusing on cleaning up particular terror threats and eliminating the secondary infrastructure and leadership that leaves very few to fight, let's say, some kind of civilian uprising. Now, Iran is also reaching a new stage of the war. By this, I mean they have realized now it's very unlikely for them to hit a lot of U.S. infrastructure in the region, particularly because we don't exactly have fully staffed embassies there at the moment, waiting for a drone or perhaps a ballistic missile, one of dozens, to get through. So what do they do? Instead now, Iran is launching as many missiles and drones as it can get away with from secondary locations at the oil fields in Oman. Reminder, Oman was one of the countries originally that sided with Iran, even when Iran was striking Kuwait, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, even firing missiles at Turkey and Cyprus, Jordan and Lebanon. You have a very bizarre, very, very bizarre move by the Iranian new supreme leader, if he, again, is in power supposedly, launching at the Oman oil fields. An absolutely insane, and I mean an insane image from the coast of one of the oil craft off the shores of Oman as the infrastructure in Oman refineries and holding facilities burns behind it. So Iran is now trying the approach, if I can't have my oil and give it to Russia and China, no one can have oil. That's a dumb move. Again, Oman, one of the only groups that supported Iran initially, now, again, firing at them. We do have some clips as well of them trying to strike and successfully getting a few through, because these are civilian targets of the oil fields in Kuwait. So in Kuwait, look, I want to make sure we get this particular. This is a very, very specific, very, very specific. There's a nighttime burning. You can see right here. Sorry, I know I'm skipping through a couple of the other media clips that I wanted to dive into. We need to discuss. You can see some of the coastal and shoreline facilities that are burning. That in Kuwait, as well as a really disturbing bit of footage here, because there were confirmed to be civilians on site in Kuwait. This is from the Basha report of one of the facilities that was hit earlier today. I mean, truly horrifying stuff. Horrifying stuff from the Iranians, now just blindly firing at civilians. Now, speaking of firing on civilians, 46 senators have now filed a letter, according to Reuters. Nearly every U.S. Senate Democrat have now signed a letter to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, requesting a swift investigation into the airstrike, singular, not airstrikes, but airstrike, supposedly singular, on the girls' school in Iran. Now, there's a lot of people online using this as a dunking point, and I want to make this perfectly clear. The initial sources on this particular airstrike or missile strike or explosion were extremely varied and came from several different sources. So one of the initial sources that was released on an Iranian state-sponsored piece of media, claiming to be from an Iranian, essentially a telegram copy of an Iranian radio source inside the country, state media, said that it was an Iranian failure. They had admitted to it, and that like a dozen maybe in the building had died, as it was a Saturday, and not a lot of children were expected to be in the building on that Saturday. And then I suggested, based on what we saw in the region from some of the contrail fire in the region, the contrails in the sky, the plumes of smoke in the sky, as it were, the vapor, that the Iranians had a faulty second stage rocket, and it had failed, and therefore landed, in this case, on the school. Now, the United States did confirm that while this is still under investigation by not just the United States, not just Israel, not just, by the way, the Kingdom of Jordan, and not just Saudi Arabia, but a couple of private groups as well, because this is rather of interest. It appears, according to the data that we do have, that several groups had active ballistic missiles, rockets in the air right before the time of the explosion. And we do not have any kind of information that shows what other targets in the area might have been hit. So there are a lot of people that are running right there right now saying this is exactly what happened. Again, I have an Iranian state media source that had prior confirmed that they had done it, or at least had claimed that they had done it. And then there are also sources in the United States. I think Senator Kennedy of Louisiana has said, oh, it was an unfortunate mistake that we did. I don't know what intelligence he's citing that suggests this, because according to the Department of War, who we have by the way, reached out to fully already, has not owned up to the attack or said that Israel had done it or that we had targeted with a specific kind of munitions. There has not been an external analysis. As one of the comments on the channel points out, and I think this is rather important at a point that I've made in the last couple days, from Last Breath Woodworks, said, funny how the number keeps growing daily on the school. It started at a dozen, and then it was 15, and then it was 25, then it was 50, then it was 100, now it's 200. I seem to remember these particular kinds of numbers from the Palestinian Health Authority, which you guessed it, that's a proxy of Iran, or the Palestinian Health Ministry, excuse me. So that brings us over to some of the other weird claims. Gavin Newsom today, while acknowledging that there was an FBI alert to California police departments back in February, then took a weird sidetrack to complain that he said there is, quote, no end in sight for the Trump administration in Iran, which again, very, very bizarre to go out and stake a particular claim like this right here, right now, but that's never stopped Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom before.
What's the end game here? We've seen gas prices spike because of his decision, cause and effect, by 69 cents here in the state of California, 60 cents plus overall on average across the United States of America.
He is getting roasted for this, by the way. His press office put up some weird kind of like AI image of Donald Trump next to a gas station sign in California. It was over $8 a gallon, and people very quickly pointed out, yeah, Trump has very clearly said there may be a temporary bump in oil prices because people are a bit nervous. But California is kind of the state which policy revolves around, making all of the gas prices all of the time as insanely high as possible. So we're going to get to some of the particular statements from the president here, but we'll let Gavin Newsom finish his complaint.
We've seen markets roiling. We've seen no real end game in sight as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz. We saw today oil prices now going back in that $90 barrel range, and more concern about the extended range of the Iranian attacks, not just in the Middle East, but to your point and question about the prospects that we could see things happen here in the homeland.
Just very, very, very strange. Now, the president of the United States has addressed directly the concerns about oil prices. Oil prices shot up per barrel to over 100 something. Everyone said it was going to be $200 per barrel, and then it dropped down to 80. Today it finished around 90. Here was here was the president of the United States addressing this today.
Some really good-looking people. All right, let's go. There you go. This guy here, Pulitzer Prize.
So, sorry, really weird clip error there. The president of the United States did tell the group associated there that he understood that prices on oil were high temporarily. They're coming down. Here's another clip of the president announcing he is releasing some of the oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
I'm pleased to report that
Earlier today, the International Energy Agency agreed to coordinate the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from various national petroleum reserves around the world, which will substantially reduce the oil prices as we end this threat to America and this threat to the world. We don't want to leave early, do we? We got to finish the job, right?
Now, that is an important point made by the president. If you are going to do the job, then it is absolutely worth doing well. Now, again, you would think that those over on, let's say, the Democrat side of the aisle might move forward with ensuring that the United States is secure and then beating the president up in the polls, let's say, in the meantime. And they're not doing that. They're not doing that at all. They are not doing that whatsoever. And it's a very bizarre move from them. Patty Murray, over on the Senate, tried to make a bill that was filled with all kinds of junk, and then suggested that Republicans refused to separate out the Department of Homeland Security funding from ICE and Border Patrol. So we have TSA and U.S. Coast Guardsmen currently getting shorted because Patty Murray is the Democrat who put forward essentially a poison pill style bill into the Senate and then complained when people didn't vote for it. Not even all of the Democrats ended up voting in favor for her. And then when you look at the rest of the Democrat leadership, it was pointed out today by both left-wing and right-wing sources that Democrats are just refusing in any way, shape, or form to negotiate whatsoever on funding the Homeland Security budget. Again, ICE is already funded through 2027 at their current rate to 2029 at the kind of the reduced rate. So if you're going to make someplace, somewhere, you're going to make some kind of an argument that the Trump administration is dangerous for the country, that's not bearing out in the polls. It's not bearing out even in the attacks, which is why the Democrats have now shifted to a complaint all about Pete Hegseth and surf and turf gate. This is what Gavin Newsom has pivoted to. Again, an FBI alert that has a lot of people concerned over potential terror activity, as we've seen terror activity rise from Austin to Long Island to, of course, in New York City itself. Instead, we're going to go all in on, again, what is being called surf and turf gate. We're going to get to that. We're going to bring the radio crew back in from commercial break, the TV crew as well. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal. Very briefly, I want to give you what may be one of the most bizarre, straw-grasping stories that is about to be all over your TV and your phone and your internet and God knows, Facebook for the next several months. No, not that even the Washington Post now is reporting that Iranian and Russian sources are actively trying to push a bizarre Trump did everything right now because of Epstein claim and have been caught red-handed. No, not the very disturbing story out of China regarding their surrogacy program, which, again, we're going to talk about with Emma Waters here in just a bit. Instead, the media is going to focus all of their attention. They're starting to. We are in that rising stage here of this next news cycle. The next Pete Hegseth scandal. So you remember there was a big, huge, super duper ultra scandal that Pete Hegseth was in a Signal group chat. And they said, hey, in 2 hours, we're going to go ahead and strike the Houthis in Yemen. And this was seen as the biggest, ultra, superest, duperest national security leak of all time. Well, this new scandal, this dwarfs the other scandal. It laughs at the other scandal. This new scandal, the ultimate scandal of scandals, is from Open the Books, opinion Substack, that every single left-wing outlet, from the Washington Post to the New York Times, even some of the weird libertarian-ish outlets, have now run as the ultimate scandal. This is that Pete Hegseth and the Department of War spent oodles, canoodles, and toaster strudels of money on expensive food. That's the scandal. So according to the Open the Books opinion piece, so Open the Books is a federal spending and campaign finance watchdog group, but they also have a staff that writes a bunch of op-eds. They wrote a really long, aggravated opinion piece that is now being treated as like this big, huge rote news, criticizing spending reports from the Department of War near the end of last year, at the end of September 2025. September into October, that's the end of the fiscal year. And during that time, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's Pentagon administration purchased in the millions of dollars worth of fine foods, some upgrades on personal device technology, and some furniture. And the big thing, what you will see in this photo here, this tweet from Gavin Newsom's press office, this AI photo of Pete Hegseth, and he's reclining with a bunch of steaks and fruit trays and lobster tails, and saying, "Oh, he spent all of this money here in just 1 month." It's supposed to be this really big, huge, incredible own, an own like you've never seen before. And it turns out that, first of all, this particular crew over at Open the Books did a really, really awful job of some of the background research diving into this particular story. Allow me to explain. They go in, they say that he spent $2 million on Alaskan king crab, $6.9 million on lobster tails, $15.1 million on ribeye steaks, $1 million on salmon, and several hundreds of thousands of dollars on desserts. Now, look, I'm going to level with you here. To the average American, yeah, that sounds bizarre and corrupt. Or do we have like a bunch of generals and admirals and bureaucrats that are sitting around feasting on surf and turf nightly? Well, that's what the Open Books report, the New York Times article, the tweets, angry and impassioned for people like Molly Jong-Fast and everyone from Chuck Schumer to Gavin Newsom really want you to believe. All of this pearl clutching is intended to convey, oh, the superest duperest amounts of waste and fraud and abuse, and it's backfiring really, really, really hard. It's just really bad. Really bad. Now, there is one particular B-roll piece. I'm going to see if I can find it here. It's a bit more difficult to find. Ah, yes. So this is from The Reason's Eric Bowen. And it's an AI-generated thumbnail of Pete Hegseth eating lobster. So just so we're aware, whether it's a libertarian publication or whether we're looking over at the left-wing publications like the New Republic and whatnot, the goal is to get you to believe that Pete Hegseth is sitting there eating several millions of dollars worth of lobster. Even the Open the Books article makes it clear that, oh, it was believed back then that the most expensive expense one could order at a hotel was Russian caviar. And that has nothing to do with any of this. And if you ask any veteran, heck, if you ask any civilian or military contractor, you ask many people who have known veterans, this is all complete garbage, and here's why. One of the oldest traditions in the post-World War II military is serving surf and turf, steaks and seafood of the highest quality, a ribeye and a lobster tail, to troops for a couple of different reasons. This entire scandal is a nothing burger, but they want you to believe that it's prime ribeye. Hey, see what I did there? Allow me to explain. Right before deployment, there's a joke, or excuse me, right before deployment, you get sit down, the battalion's sent, you get this really nice meal, they bring out the steaks, you bring out the lobster, and they announce, hey, battalion staff, brass is going to get in there and give you a little bit of a briefing after you enjoy a little lobster tail and ribeye. And it's an old running joke amongst the branches that you're about to be deployed. Things are about to happen. I cannot tell you how many reels, how many texts, how many jokes, how many memes I have seen and have sent about that exact joke. The United States military, by the way, in the Biden administration, in the Trump administration before that, in the Obama administration, in the Bush administration, you serve the troops surf and turf. Now, I'm being told since then that some units currently enjoy surf and turf Fridays. I thought that was only something the Air Force enjoyed. But surf and turf Fridays, whether there's a dangerous operation or not. Now, of course, there are also very fine foods and desserts that are served to troops after particularly stressful missions or deployments. In fact, there's like a kind of decorum that even the E4 Mafia is supposed to respect about certain surf and turf meal days. But all of these hard-nosed, incredible democracy dies in darkness journalists, these morons with typewriters and keyboards, didn't think to ask a veteran about the surf and turf. I'm going to level with you. Even David French, I'm going to repeat that. Even David French knows that this is one of the dumbest scandals fabricated by the left. Yeah, that one. Who says that James Tallarico is his Christian superhero. The formerly conservative columnist over at the New York Times, quote, "When I was in Iraq serving at a very remote forward operating base not far from the Iranian border, we had steak and crab legs almost every Sunday. It was the military's version of a thank you meal, and it was appreciated. There are lots of things to be outraged at, but feeding our deployed troops, well, it's not one of them." I'm thinking of the meme, "The worst person that you know just made a really good point." Yep. They're making, every single Democrat that you can think of in the outrage factory is making all of the opinion outrage. Representative Melanie Stansbury, who is New Mexico's first, I believe. She's in New Mexico's first. Democrat, of course. She also serves on one of the committees related to the finance of the War Department. She said, "You better believe we'll be investigating. You better believe she's getting all angry, mad, just that." That kind of left-wing caring. Chuck Schumer freaking out about it. Gavin Newsom freaking out about it. All of this nonsense over a scandal that is nothing. It is an insult to the veterans of this country that we're throwing a fit over giving our troops a good meal or replacing old and worn-out furniture. Oh no, Hegseth bought a couple of fancy recliners. I'll tell you what, if Hegseth fills his sitting room in his house with a bunch of very expensive recliners, I tell you what, I'll join you. I'll also be pissed. I will. No. Now, there is a Steinway that was purchased, a grand piano that was purchased, and it is being framed as being purchased for the Air Force Chief of Staff. You're not allowed to make military personal purchases like that. That's not a thing. From what I'm told, he is likely going to then forward that to the United States Air Force Academy. Say, why would the United States Air Force Academy need a baby grand piano or a full grand piano? Well, I'll give you a little bit of a personal anecdote. When I was just a wee lad, brightly carrying my big fat envelope for the United States Military Academy at West Point, I went to this little thing called Summer Leadership Seminar up there near Fort Buckner at West Point. And I very much enjoyed, as we were touring around the campus, going into Jefferson Hall, big, gorgeous library, breathtaking stonework. That the Obama Library was even a fraction of the beauty of some of the architecture at the United States Military Academy at West Point. And up on the top floor, next to a pair of closed double doors, my stupid goober nonsense sat down on the Steinway at the top of the library at West Point, at Jefferson Hall. And I started playing. And then a guy with way too many stars and a pretty huge fruit salad on his chest promptly left the double door room and said, "Hey, can you maybe not play Glenn Miller right now?" And I blushed, which again, without the beard, I looked like a third grade girl and from head to toe. And then, of course, I scuttled away muttering like Radar and MASH. I'm looking for the scandal here. But giving the troops some new phones, giving the troops some decent meals, that's what you got? To me, that shows that things are not as fun as they seem. And the reason that things are not as fun as they seem is that legislation pertaining to voting is moving forward in many states, if not at the federal government level, which Trump is not letting off the pressure on that, which we'll talk about in a minute. You have former Senate candidate Jasmine Crockett, Democrat that wanted to run for Senate, and lost her Democrat candidate seat to James Tallarico, now making it clear, you know what's kind of awful? There weren't mail-in ballots. And if there aren't mail-in ballots, there's a lot less Democrats who vote.
There was a benefit to shining a light on what it was that they were trying to do in the dark in Texas. So unfortunately, we've seen our numbers fall now that they have these voter restrictions in place. But I do think it's important for us to have the conversation around the...
Oh, that's strange. What an odd thing to say. Boy, when we're not allowed to, throw in mail-in ballots that could be from absolutely anybody. Man, it sure seems that there's fewer Democrats who cast ballots. I'm shocked, amazed. You don't say. Now, this brings us over to the Save America Act and the President of the United States, who is now, hearing a lot of calls from congressmen in the House and the Senate for the resignation of Senate Majority Leader John Thune. And that entire reason comes down to a clip that has been played, quite a bit at this point, in which Thune says, "Hey, look, I don't have the math. I don't have, the math isn't adding up. We're really not able to get out there and get a lot of this done because the numbers just aren't looking good, even though we have a 53 vote majority in the Senate, and you only need 51 for the walking filibuster." Anywho, here was Thune, again, the clip played, where he says that the math ain't mathin'.
Run a risk of being on the wrong side of President Trump and your resistance to do this talking filibuster, tying the Senate in knots for weeks.
We don't have the votes either to proceed, get on a talking filibuster, nor to sustain one if we got on it. But that is just a function of math, and there isn't anything I can do about that.
Now, that's not true, by the way. You are the Senate Majority Leader. You have the power to, inform individuals that there's going to be mighty fewer dollars in the campaign coffers come next election. Now, I've looked at the number of senators and people who are retiring. I see Tom Tillis finally on his way out the useless doorstop. I see Mitch McConnell from Kentucky being wheeled and walkered throughout the Capitol. To be fair, about half as old as Maxine Waters, but still really, really up there. And I've done the math. 53 minus 2, that's 51. You can lose one more and still have J.D. Vance cast some kind of a tiebreaker vote here. What's the deal? What's the problem? And, Senate Majority Leader John Thune said the math wasn't there for enough votes to pass the Save America Act via the standing filibuster in the Senate. There was a lot of confusion, given that Republicans have a 53-vote majority in the Senate, and all you need is 51. So as a public service, here are the Republican senators so far not on board with passing the SAVE Act via the standing filibuster, and on screen, their office phone numbers. John Barrasso of Wyoming, John Boozman of Arkansas, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, Susan Collins of Maine, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, Kevin Kramer of North Dakota, Mike Crapo of Idaho, John Curtis of Utah, Steve Daines of Montana, Deb Fisher of Nebraska, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, John Hoeven of North Dakota, Jim Justice of West Virginia, John Kennedy of Louisiana, James Lankford of Oklahoma, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Jerry Moran of Kansas, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, Tim Scott of South Carolina, John Thune of South Dakota, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Roger Wicker of Mississippi, and Todd Young of Indiana. Now, you bet I have since called Todd Young and said, "Hey, your constituent here in the great state of Indiana, would you mind doing the job and moving this on through?" Because if Americans buy every single piece of polling, and I mean every single piece, when Harry Enton is repeating polls from week to week, that's a big deal over on CNN. He makes it clear consistently, Americans are wildly, wildly in favor of voter ID regulations, ensuring that citizens are the ones that are voting. And when you instead waltz out and say, well, we don't have the vote, I don't want to really get into it. And the president of the United States has made it clear at this point, yeah, we're sticking with this.
The president keeps adding pieces of policy to this legislation. Would it be?
So what are the pieces of legislation that the president of the United States is adding? It's a very good question. What are the pieces of legislation the president of the United States could add to the Save America Act? What is he adding here as kind of his requirements? The president is making it very, very, very clear that in the case of the United States Senate, in addition to the Save America Act, the Senate's not allowed to cut a ton of random deals here, there, and everywhere that give Democrats what they want to maybe, say, exchange certain procedural differences for Homeland Security changes. That's what's being referenced there by the pieces of legislation. You can see in the reporting, even those who are trying to say, well, what's President Trump doing to make this really, really hard on you? No. In fact, here's the president making it clear. It's the Save America Act or nothing.
Is Senator Thune listening to you when you say you want to pass the Save America Act. He says there aren't the votes to do it right now. What's your response?
Well, he's got to be a leader. You know, if he's a leader, he's got to get him. It's the most popular bill I've ever seen put before Congress. And it's voter ID and it's voter. You have to be able to be a citizen to vote. It's called citizenship. And we're also adding in no men playing in women's sports, no transgender mutilization of our children, and no mail-in ballots, fake mail-in ballots. We have none of that, except in the case of the military, etc.
Makes sense. I genuinely don't see how Thune is going to move around on this, but again, we'll get to that here in a bit. Lisa Murkowski, however, in the meantime, Lisa Murkowski has strolled out before God and everybody to finally now here. Again, I'm amazed that this particular reporter from Mike Lindell's crew has done more congressional reporting and administration reporting, microphone in the face, get questions, get answers, than really anybody I've seen. But here's Lisa Murkowski of Alaska being the disappointment for us all.
Where do you stand on the Save America Act? Do you, support getting this legislation passed to protect elections?
Not as it is drafted, no.
Wait a minute here. I seem to remember playing this exact hallway in which we had some of the moderate Republicans that were saying, well, no, actually, I like the way this drafted. What's wrong with the legislation now? What's the issue? How is it drafted in a manner that is an upset to you?
Why not?
The implementation in a rural state like Alaska is going to disenfranchise an extraordinary majority.
Okay, so because Alaska is rural, it is going to disenfranchise people. This is the new argument. I'll be ready for this because Chuck Schumer said this kind of stuff as well. The new, brand new, fresh, super duper, alley-ooper, extremely incredible argument du jour that is being delivered hot and fresh for you like a Little Caesar's pizza is if we enact the Save America Act and you have to go register to vote, then that's going to kick a lot of people off of the voter rolls. Now that should be a little bizarre to you because I, like many of you, have to, register to vote. That's something that I have to do quite consistently. That's kind of a weird and confusing thing. I mean, what do you mean? Well, this is now Chuck Schumer's line as well, because the racism thing didn't work. The black people are too stupid and poor thing didn't work. The women are too stupid and can't figure out how last names work didn't work. So now Chuck Schumer's got a new one. They're going to take the magic eraser, got old Mr. Clean out here, to the voter rolls. And that's bad.
Undermine democracy, prevent people from voting in a democracy, and that's the only way you can win. That's not democracy, Donald Trump. That's autocracy, letting you or Doge or Musk pick who's taken off the rolls.
This is the thing. It's the rolls. It's the rolls. That's the issue. That's what you got to get rid of, Marge. You got to get rid of the rolls. They're constrictive. Bizarre.
Not even notifying them when they show up to vote and they say you're no longer on the rolls, you're purged. That's not democracy.
I'm sorry. Hold on a second here. You are now admitting there are these states, these municipalities, in which you can be registered for a federal election some fine day ages back into the distant beyond, 10 years ago. And then you can, without showing any proof of ID since then, you can request a mail-in ballot. Well, you've already registered one time, and then what? Oh, then we get all those stories from 2020 and 2024 and 2022 from, by the way, both the left and the right, of people saying, I didn't vote in the election. Why am I being counted on the rolls here? Why does it say on this state Secretary of State website, again, on both the left and the right, that I voted? I didn't cast a ballot. I haven't mailed in any kind of a ballot. Well, gee, if you can just one and done, I accepted the Lord when I was 4, and so now I'm on the voter rolls forever. This ain't the Lamb's Book of Life, bud. These are voter rolls. I'm sorry, what's so bad about asking people to go register to vote? What's the problem? Oh, they're really rural. Oh, well, that excuses it. Oh, well, I mean, clearly, if I live in a remote place that I chose to live in, I should be dispatched to Butler, and you should just assume that I am better than all of you. And I refuse to disenfranchise those who chose to self-isolate themselves. I'm sorry, what? Why is it the government's responsibility to make up for where you moved? Why? This was my argument when rural people down in Texas. You chose to move to the butt end of nowhere. And then you're like, well, man, I need the government to bring all of this stuff out to me. What? Why? You chose to get away from it all. Why then does the all need to be brought to you? You know what? A lot of your neighbors don't like the all being brought in, because when the all is brought in, then what usually follows is a bunch of crime and garbage and useless subdivisions and a bunch of solar farm crap that doesn't work anyway. They're going to purge the rolls. Oh no, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'm still registered to vote in Wisconsin. I haven't lived in Wisconsin since 2016, the spring of 2016. I am still, to this day, being reminded. I have called the Johnson County, Wisconsin officials. I have said, take my name off of the roll. I live in Indiana. I have lived in Indiana for quite a while. Besides that, I've been in and out of the country several times since then, which is supposed to be one of the things that kicks you off of the rolls. If I wanted to cast a ballot in Wisconsin, I very likely could do so. I just got a notification about the primary via my phone the other day. My number is not a Wisconsin area code. It is insane to continue to push against this. And yet, what are Republicans in the Senate doing? One of the individuals that I listed, one of the individuals that I mentioned was John Barrasso. John Barrasso is out there making the case. Again, not a terrible case. He is out there making the case that, well, I mean, the Democrats have closed down the Department of Homeland Security. It's very dangerous. It's irresponsible. It's not a very good idea. I don't recommend it. I agree with that. I do. Here's John Barrasso, senator, making it very clear. Again, he's not for moving the Senate forward. He's going to go out there and he's just going to complain about DHS.
Mr. President, for 26 days now, Democrats have left our country undefended. Democrats in this chamber have voted 3 times to keep the Department of Homeland Security shut down. Once again, Democrats are putting illegal immigrant criminals ahead of the safety and the security of the American people.
Now, I know there are some Washington insiders who watch this show. I'm aware there are a couple of Senate offices who watch this show, and occasionally even an administration official. Very flattered. I have a genuine question to ask you here. You can shoot me an email later. There's a contact form at tonykinnett.com. Some of you have my cell. You can answer this for me. When is the last time that a senator or a representative got up to the podium and said, Mr. Speaker, President, man, Mr. Person, did you know that the Democrats are bad and I'm very good? When's the last time that did a bit of good, ever? One time. Tell me one time that we had some major national momentum that changed because some guy buttoned up his suit, walked down to the podium and said, good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Sergeant at Arms, for giving me a high five on my way in. It is very bad. It is now 26 days that the Democrats have closed the Department of Homeland Security. Serious issue? Yes. Something that they should be concerned about? Yes. What are you doing? Who are you convinced? What, Lisa Murkowski is over there going, oh man, I hope he doesn't ring up in an official podium speech. Oh no. Mazie Hirono, who's in the hallway trying to figure out how to Velcro her shoes, is sitting there going, I sure hope they don't get in front of the Senate and go, it's been 26 days since they have been reckless. Oh no. I saw all of the tweets from Democrats this afternoon saying, my heart has changed. I'm saved. This is just as performative as when Mark Wayne Mullen challenged the union boss to a fight. That crap from Barrasso is just as performative as Jasmine Crockett and Lauren Boebert taking off the earrings and getting ready for a tussle. It's just as useless. It's a waste of time. I say we declare a resolution that Chris Farley took the stage in an SNL sketch that he then adopted over to, he dressed up as Newt Gingrich. He went before the House. It's one of the greatest comedy sketches of Chris Farley's. God rest his soul. And he essentially announced a bunch of resolutions that they all just went, aye. He said, Democrats are stinky. Aye. They're going to leave my mother alone. Aye. It's a great comedy sketch pointing out those kind of resolutions are useless. They're pointless. I'm annoyed. I am. I'm annoyed by this. There are things to do. I also agree. Again, rising terror attacks. And this is one of the things that bothers me because I'm often asked, a common mailtime question is, but Tony, they rig all the elections. They rig the primaries too. Everything's rigged. You don't really believe that, because if you really believed that nothing in this country was due any impact because of you, if you really, truly, deeply believe every single election from the dog catcher to the president, everything is rigged, everything is called ahead of time, like you're an Italian mobster fixing the fights in the 30s, hey, if you really believed that, then you would be to the aggressively doing something about it stage, like the Sic Semper Tyrannis stage of things. It's a very easy thing to say, oh, well, the issue is it's all stolen, so why should I care? Why should I get involved? Why should I care about the primary? This is honestly why you should get involved in the primary. There are a lot of really good representatives in every state that maybe should consider running for Senate. I'm sure that we can find somebody. Barrasso, what is that? Is that North Dakota? No, Wyoming. Barrasso in Wyoming. I'm certain we can find somebody else in Wyoming of the 14 people that live there. I'm sure we can, lucky 14 people. Oh man, love your state's low population density, you lucky jerks. I'm sure we can find somebody else to come in and actually argue things. By the way, this is the reason why state legislatures were supposed to elect the Senate. Because people who constantly paid attention to politics and what your state needed from DC would then choose two people to send to the Capitol, and then they would affect policy. So anyway, that's just something that is particularly frustrating. But that brings us over to a little bit on the Trump side of things. Now, we do need to close out our broadcast hour. We're going to flip right back after we send them off to the sweet nothings and goodbyes, because I have some special stuff for y'all this evening. We still have the Chinese communist surrogacy plans, which very, very much cement the importance of the Supreme Court's ruling on birthright citizenship. And then, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about some more of Trump and some key things that happened today, because not exactly small stuff. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't y'all go anywhere here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We're now to the, I guess, technically the bonus tonus section of the show. And that means we're no longer on FCC regulated time. So that means I can no longer be threatened with jail time. Jail time. Jail time. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the extra stuff that happened today that's being glossed over because, well, it just so happens that whole theory was complete nonsense and garbage. So you were told, I was told, everyone was told that if they were only elected to office, they were going to release all of the super duper secret hidden ultra connections to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. We went through a whole rigmarole. Pam Bondi promised the world and delivered jack squat. And then, after a series of investigations, the Democrats decided, hey, political capital, cool. Marjorie Taylor Greene threw a fit, and now we are watching a Democrat and a Republican fight in one of the most intensely red districts in Georgia. So after all of this, now we're getting continual depositions. And Jeffrey Epstein's accountant, according to Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, representative of Kentucky, pointing out that, you were told Donald Trump was super close and doing all of this work with Epstein. I know the Speedway gas station report that said Hillary Clinton was actually the Unabomber. That was like really good evidence, but no. Here was that from today.
First of all, Mr. Khan's answering every question thus far. We've completed 2 full hours of depositions. I would say we are possibly at the halfway point. It could last more than 4 hours, but he confirmed there were 5 clients that paid money to Epstein, and that was Les Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Steven Sinofsky, the Rothschilds, and Leon Black. We've already deposed Wexner, and we're going to be deposing Leon Black very soon. Mr. Khan testified under oath because the Democrats asked this question, that he had never seen any type of transaction to Trump or anyone in his family. That makes the fifth witness now that's testified under oath that they've never seen any involvement by Donald Trump or their family. That includes Khan, Bill Clinton, Wexner, Acosta, and Barr. So I know that's the obsession of a lot of the media with respect to the Epstein investigation, but I will again remind everyone, the investigation's about getting the truth to the American people, trying to figure out how the government failed, answer questions we all have. Was he an agent? Was our government involved in any type of cover-up in any way, shape, or form? And finally, what can be done to prevent this from happening in the future? So,
now, the answer so far from every other major investigation and prosecution happening around the world regarding the Epstein individuals, we've often wondered, how is it the dude got his money? And now we are getting the answers as to who gave him his money for influence peddling, for trafficking secrets to them. Of course, obviously the conversation regarding Wexler. This is something that was involved very closely regarding, believe, Charles of England. And now getting all of the way through this entire mess, through the Epstein files and situation, Comer says one really good thing and one thing that's not exactly the most useful thing. So he says one thing that's good. Hey, who was involved in giving this dude money? Good question. Bill Gates, was he involved? Obviously, you mentioned some individuals over in the banking sector. That's a good thing, because now once you can identify the corruption things, you can maybe, look at the Clinton Foundation, which does a lot of the same work with a lot of these other individuals. Those are things you can get them on. You don't RICO charge Sean Diddy Combs and then he gets off scot-free because you charged him with the moon and you really only could have prosecuted him on something a little bit smaller and specific. But when you charge him with the moon and then staple that with a bunch of other charges, then he gets off pseudo scot-free and faces a couple of years in prison instead of a lot of years in prison. That's what we were looking at here. There are some financial ties that do need to be looked at because of business corruption, influence peddling, and the same kinds of insider info exchange that Nancy Pelosi has been accused of regarding the stock market, or we look at Gavin Newsom's wife and paying herself for videos about her husband to California kids, or of course when we are looking at the major fraud allegations and investigations and indictments in Minnesota with the Tim Walz and Keith Ellison administrations, or again the California administration under Gavin Newsom regarding hospice and a whole list of other medical care service fraud in the state. It is a wild time to waste time. And I'm going to hold my tongue on a few of these things, but it is a little bit obnoxious to watch. In the meantime, some individuals here and there instead make the decision to waste everybody's time with silliness. Wasting everybody's time with silliness. Focusing on specific problems that the American people have, focusing on solving those particular problems, and then making it clear that you are going to continue a pursuit of specific and detailed policy in the future. That's the kind of stuff that Americans really, really like, really, really enjoy. Now, one of these policies in Kentucky that the president was pushing very heavily was his no tax on tips.
Thanks to the tax cuts, which are record-setting, we passed the great, big, beautiful bill, and I'm pleased to report that Verse Logistics is investing more than $10 million into expanding its operations this year right here, $10 million. And you're buying brand new tractor trailers and opening up warehouses in 2 additional states, Texas and North Carolina. And that's what it's all about. And that's why we did it. And with the help of our tax cuts, all of those trucks and warehouses and equipment purchases, everything that we're doing, and everything that you see in this country that's being built, you get what's called expensing, meaning a deduction in the first year. 1 year, it's the bit. Now, to a lot of people, that doesn't mean. To me, it means something else. It means jobs. That's why we have so many jobs, the best jobs ever. Perhaps most importantly to the workers here today, I'm pleased to report that the great, big, beautiful bill also delivers no tax on overtime. Whoever thought that was going to happen? That means every extra hour you work, your overtime pay is now 100% tax-free. You have no tax. Remember that when you go and vote.
Now, this is the president getting out and making the case that a lot of representatives and senators should be making, that a lot of the state and the national party should be making. Not, oh, I know everything is fine. If you think that things aren't fine, then you're blind and you're not being thankful enough. No, not that. But saying, hey, here are some things to look out for. We know the problems that you're facing. We know that right now, oil prices, not exactly where we want them, but that's temporary. They're coming down. Also, here at home, we are unleashing American energy. We're developing more energy. We're building pipelines. We're expanding our production in coal and natural gas, in general crude oil, in nuclear. We're keeping our citizens safer. We're doing these things with the Department of Agriculture to try to lower certain costs so that while we're boxing China out of the international market, we're also taking care of our farmers. These things, just thing after thing after thing after thing. Not a lot of grandeur, not a lot of extra stuff. Here you go, and here's how you're going to feel it. And then Americans can take that prediction, and then they can hold it up to the light and see if it's true or not. That's powerful. By the way, that's the Reagan strategy. That is the Reagan strategy. That is what he did. He said, Carter sucked. Here are the things we're doing differently. You see for yourself. Yeah, that's some useful stuff. That is absolutely some useful stuff. And as one comment points out, and I very much agree, can you go back and make a tax, for example, like the no tax on overtime retroactive, back 20 years? Didn't think so. I enjoy the quip there, and I agree. There's a lot of expectations right now that Trump needs to retroactively fix a lot of really bad policies in the past. And that's not going to be a thing. So in the meantime, what you need to see from the administration and from Congress is actual promotion of policy. Now, Congress hasn't had to do a lot of promotion of policy because in the last couple of administrations, it's been executive order bonanza. But Americans do know deep down, I should clarify, independents and Republicans know deep down that you kind of need Congress to pass these things through and codify them. Johnson has been passing a lot of these things through the House as quick as they come in. Johnson's getting the crew together, they send it up, they push it over to the Senate. And then John Thune struggles to somehow make 53 the majority of 100. It certainly makes sense why there are a growing number of Republicans in the House and the Senate, at state governments, who are calling on a potential new leader of the Senate. Now, I do want to push back on one particular thing. There's a claim that is being pushed around that you might fall prey to. That, there's no rule that says J.D. Vance can't be the majority leader of the Senate. Yes, there is. Vice President J.D. Vance cannot be the majority leader of the Senate except in a tiebreaker situation. John Adams made this very, very clear right away because he tried this. John Adams, the first vice president of the United States, who was so freaking bored, he mentions that he counted his teeth with his tongue in Senate committees time after time. He can't be the Senate majority leader. They can't vote him that. All of the weird, loophole stuff. Well, we could elect Trump the Speaker of the House. No, you can't. No. That's wish casting stuff. That ain't going to happen, Captain. And Vance really can't, as the vice president, be the Senate majority leader. He's the tiebreaker. There are very different rules in the stupid parliamentary system that is still, although stupid, very to the point and accurate. Now, before we get to some of the mail time, I really want to tackle this bewilderingly disturbing China surrogacy, essentially a usurpation of American resources, federal assistance, and then, of course, the general population of the United States through anchor baby surrogate programs that are a weird point of friction in the Chinese Communist government. It's not just limited to the South American countries. Again, China, and especially their impact specifically to, you guessed it, California. It's a very, very serious problem. We're going to talk about that with Emma Waters right here up next. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
We're joined by Emma Waters, policy analyst for the Center for Technology and the Human Person over at the Heritage Foundation. California is not just in the news at the moment because of, the FBI warning about possible Iranian drone attacks, but also something to do with a little bit of Chinese-owned surrogacy agencies out in Southern California. Emma, tell us a little bit more about this.
So in what is truly a bizarre but not unexpected story, if you've been following this high-tech birth tourism, foreign nationals from China have been coming to the United States and working with surrogacy agencies in the United States to have babies. Now, because of our birthright citizenship laws, any child born in the United States, even if their parents are foreign nationals, gain and maintain the full rights of U.S. citizenship. And so Chinese nationals, more than any other country, have really been taking advantage of this, in many cases for the explicit purpose of citizenship. And so what this means is that in California, where 75% of all of these contracts and companies take place, they've actually created a boutique industry that's intentionally trying to bring in foreign nationals to have babies through American surrogates for all of these benefits. And sadly, because this industry is underregulated and unaccountable, and even in California, they just have laws intentionally built around making it as easy as possible to buy babies through surrogacy. There was a really heartbreaking scenario where this couple owned a surrogacy agency called Mark Surrogacy, where they had over 22 children in their care. And they were all contracted through this agency. And sadly, for the American surrogates, they thought that they were having children for all of these different couples who were struggling with infertility. But it turns out all of the children were just going to this one couple in China. And this one Chinese couple living in California. And there's this really big question of why they were having so many kids, especially when reports came out that multiple children were being severely physically abused by the nannies who are watching them 24/7.
I mean, it's an absolutely horrifying story. Did we actually find anything out about what it is that the individuals were participating in from the, again, surrogacy parental side here? Or what's kind of the underlying goal of the Chinese Communist administration, just kind of put overtly through this kind of thing?
So now we have to be very clear here that the Chinese government has never officially endorsed this practice. In fact, there are rumors that they actually removed one of their governing ministers because he had had a baby through surrogacy in the United States. So for the Chinese government, this is actually a sign that their country is not sufficient. Chinese nationals are not having babies in China. This is a massive problem. And there's a lot of reasons going into it. But I do think we have to ask ourselves a very important question, which is the Chinese government will do anything that they can to win an edge over the United States. And so while they may not be encouraging surrogacy in the U.S., what do you think the CCP is going to do if they realize they have all of these Chinese children who have full citizenship and rights in the United States and yet are being raised culturally, ethnically, religiously Chinese? Well, they're going to do what they've always done, which is send them to the United States and then ask them to go into sensitive areas of research or military or high security positions and pass along all of the information that they can back to China. And we don't have clear examples of this, but that's one of the biggest risk factors that's at play here. And the second is just coming down to immigration fraud. Citizenship in America is for Americans who live here and who are invested in America thriving and succeeding. But what happens when you have multiple examples of Chinese nationals saying, well, we want our child to have citizenship in the US, we'll have citizenship in China. And then if China comes out on top in the world market, we'll just bring our kids over to Chinese citizenship. But if America comes out on top, then we'll use a green card visa to get citizenship for our whole family. But in neither case is there actually a devotion or commitment or allegiance to the United States as is fitting for American citizenship itself.
So if you're looking at this kind of long-term espionage and subterfuge, then you actually have to consider what the United States at the state and the federal level can do about it, because this is clearly, as we've seen regarding stolen IP, when we've seen individuals caught smuggling information, charged in espionage cases regarding the CCP. Of course, China never acknowledges anything because that's kind of their recipe du jour here. But in this particular instance, the United States has to do something. And at the moment, we have federal judges from, here to California, which are doing everything they can to thwart any kind of law that's passed. So maybe it couldn't even be done through executive order through the DHS, which again is shut down right now anyway. What are some of our options out of this?
So first, you'll remember that President Trump introduced an executive order reinterpreting birthright citizenship as it was intended, which is to say it's for citizens who are invested in living here. You can't just get your citizenship and then run back home 6 weeks later. But what's so interesting is that I found multiple surrogacy agencies within 24 to 72 hours of the executive report coming out who said things like, here's how we can help you get around the birthright citizenship ban. Here's how you can still get citizenship for your children. In one case, the agency literally said, we know that citizenship is one of the driving motivations for why you come to America. Here's how we can get around the new executive order. These are American agencies actively defying American law and the interest of the president. So it's a massive issue. So the first is that ensuring that our birthright citizenship laws are not being abused through surrogacy and egg donation. The second is Senator Rick Scott has led the way on this incredible piece of legislation called the Safe Kids Act that would actually make it illegal for foreign nationals from adversarial nations, which include China, North Korea, and Russia, from coming to the United States and contracting with a surrogate for the purpose of, well, having a child and getting citizenship. And so his bill has now been introduced both in the House and the Senate and is gaining a lot of traction from lawmakers as more and more stories come out of the way that foreign nationals are using commercial surrogacy for immigration fraud and for national security risk across the board. So it's federal legislation like that, but I think it can be a two-and. One, it could just be prohibiting all or most foreign nationals from using surrogacy in the U.S. This does nothing to affect the domestic surrogacy industry, but would simply say, if you're from France or from China, you can't come here to work with an American surrogate. And then secondly, if we reinterpret our birthright citizenship so that children born to foreign nationals via surrogacy can't get birthright citizenship, that actually significantly kneecaps the major motivation in the market. And what's so interesting about this is that almost every developed nation already has both of those laws in place. The United States is a massive outlier here.
Emma, I'm sorry. I'm going to break professionalism for a second because this really annoys me. Something that I have seen consistently articulated in very poor fashion, by the way. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a judge, even though I have a very nice wooden gavel over there. That's all for show. I can't help but notice when Paula Zinnis writes a legal opinion, she'll say, well, you can't really say anything about people coming from here, from Vietnam or from China or from Russia or from insert country here, Cuba, Haiti, because they're not officially enemies of the United States. That's the term that they float up here. And that's what's used to smack down, for example, Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act, which we had to go through this entire process to see it upheld. Rick Scott gets this bill passed. All right, let's say the Florida hammer gets this through. We see it passed, House and Senate. Trump puts his signature right on the dotted line. And there you go. It's law. It's going to be about 5 seconds before some judge like Paula Zinnis, who's busy sucking eggs most of the time. Again, I told you I was dropping professionalism here. This is going to get slapped down immediately because they'll say, well, we're not technically at war with China. So actually, how do we begin combating that? Is that just getting rid of these crappy judges until they're all gone? What's the solution here?
I mean, that should certainly be one of our goals, regardless of the issue that we're
talking about. Shout out to Representative Brandon Gill from Texas. No, please go on.
Amen. Yes. No, I think it's continuing to push hard on this federal and even state level legislation. So Florida in the last week actually introduced a bill that would limit foreign nationals coming to Florida using surrogacy, because there are many, many cases where there's just significant levels of abuse that happen here, whether that's intended parents abandoning children, requiring surrogates to do forced abortions because they don't like the potential health prognosis of the child.
Yes.
And then there's just the interstate market question of, is this the kind of industry we want to be encouraging as
this
part of
doesn't classify as some type of free inter and intrastate trade business, as though I am simply passing beer from Texarkana to Atlanta. All right. That's not what this is about. I'm glad you brought up that Florida legislation. I do have a question on kind of the back end of this, though. Again, we're talking with Emma Waters, policy analyst for the Center of Technology and the Human Person at the Heritage Foundation. When I look at the next generation of health and human services that are delivered to the American people. And I look at the legislation that was written for a totally different time and a totally different age. I don't know whether you're Catholic or Protestant, and I don't really care for this particular conversation. We see that a lot of older legislation, whether it's in Maryland, for example, regarding early Catholic birthright registration and legislation, or whether we're looking at kind of the Midwestern German Protestant-based legislation that came out regarding this. How do we begin updating these policies so that we don't get eternal loopholes from really ancient legislation? I'm sorry, that was a really long way to ask that question, but I didn't know any better way to ask it.
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic question. And this is something we're constantly running up against. So the first is public education. One of the biggest barriers that we reach in any of these conversations is that people are like, wait, what? You can have a baby through surrogacy? What? It can be a single dad who buys egg, creates an embryo, and puts it in another woman and pays $100,000, and that's legal in the United States. And then you tell them that foreign nationals can do that, and their minds are just blown, especially when they realize China is the biggest buyer of babies. And so part of it is updating our education and really just making this part of our common knowledge. But the second is that we have to take into account that our technology is pushing against the sort of moral limits we've placed in law. So take, for example, the Alabama IVF decision that was announced in 2024. This turned into a massive personhood debate. We won't get into all of the details there, but there is this footnote in the Alabama Supreme Court decision that a justice wrote that I thought was incredibly profound. So he was saying that if we continued to deny personhood to human embryos until they were born from the womb of a woman, that's sort of how we define personhood in the US. He asked the question, well, then what are we going to do when our artificial womb technology develops to such a place where you can have a human embryo that's fully gestated and born not from a human woman, but from this artificial womb machine? Is that child never going to be considered a person based on our current laws and definition of what it means to be a human? And so he did this to sort of make the point that actually the value of the human life cannot be determined based on the technology or location of it, but actually has to account for all of these advanced technologies. I'm not promoting artificial wombs at all, but if there was an artificial womb, that child, legally speaking, would not be a child in any of the 50 states in America. That's insane.
That's exactly my point. And I actually, this originally spawned from a question that I asked Secretary of the Navy Phelan in a defense conference in Indiana. It's very weird being kind of on the inside of some of these things and being rather careful, remembering when you're asking certain questions to military officials, what is classified and what's not. So I wanted to ask him, hey, you're doing all these big shipbuilding programs. How are you ensuring that as our drone countermeasures, I'll call them, get more advanced? Well, it's not as though it's not like this is a military strategy game where there's a slot on the side of the ship for a 3-foot by 3-foot turret you slap down. What are you doing to make sure that it will be modern still when the ship is finished being built? In the same way we're crafting legislation here, by the time we get done getting Rick Scott's bill through, if the technology is totally different, if the regulations regarding obstetricians has changed, or regarding medical care for women, especially those who might have gone through, for example, there's the out of the womb surgery where you take the child out of the womb and operate on them, or in the womb as Dr. I believe Ben Carson did. Well, wait a minute. There were 3 states where that would classify as an abortion because the child was taken out of the womb prematurely. Yeah. I'm sorry. I really wasn't expecting to kind of get into this as much as I am, but it's so annoying to me to see old legislation just be ignored and then see judges and NGOs get the eternal loophole du jour. I know we're over FCC time. I just don't care because I'm really curious if you think that we're going to gain the kind of momentum beyond just the public education of outrage at these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Do you see the new class of senators and reps actually writing better policy?
I think so, because I think that they, more than anyone else, or any previous generations, if you will, can appreciate all of the nuance and complicating factors when it comes to these technologies. One thing that may look good in one area, as you used with the Ben Carson example, can all of a sudden be incredibly problematic for a life-saving restorative measure we want to actually encourage. So I think part of it is legislation with this nuance in mind that we're going to have to rely on experts, which some people are allergic to the expert class, and for good reason. But at the same time, you do need expertise to account for all of the nuances here. But I think it's just a really good, I think it's a really powerful lesson that anytime we dehumanize or lessen the value of human life, we are automatically setting ourselves up to be in a position where all of a sudden our laws are actively working against what's good for humans. But if we could intentionally and very strategically start crafting our law and recrafting older laws with that in mind, I do think we'll set ourselves up for more success. And again, I think a lot of our lawmakers today, whether it's Rick Scott or Josh Hawley or Riley Moore in the House, are just really, really sharp and really sensitive to these realities and are going to be taking them into account in a way that previous generations just didn't have to. These weren't issues when they were running for Congress to begin with. So I remain encouraged. But again, a lot of it will just come down to, is this something that lawmakers think that the public cares about? Is it something that they think is going to be a service to their district? And so it has to be the both and of both bringing these realities to bear on the everyday people who they already affect, and then also ensuring that our lawmakers are equipped to think through these nuances as they're writing legislation.
I think that's really right on point. It's one of the reasons that we like having these conversations. One of the most bothersome but yet persistently hilarious memes has been, remember Mark Zuckerberg being asked in committee about how Facebook worked by all these old senators, or the old series of tubes, internet committee things, those kinds of tropes that apply to Congress.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
We talked about this with Tim Burchett from Tennessee not too long ago, and it has stuck in my craw ever since. He said he's constantly embarrassed by people who are so in the bubble of Washington that they don't pay attention to the rapidly changing landscape around them that affects their constituents far before it affects them in their office buildings in the Capitol in D.C.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, even think about the example of Josh Hawley just recently saying he used ChatGPT for the first time after leading the charge against these AI technologies. Now, do I think what he's done legislation-wise is bad or should be changed? No, I think he's doing great work. But the fact that even our lawmakers aren't using the technologies that's becoming this daily use for all of our citizens and their constituents, I think, does reinforce this idea that there can be a massive distinction between the world that DC policymakers are living in and the real world that everyone else is engaging in day to day, which is why I'm so grateful for these conversations that really hopefully bridge the gap between those two worlds.
And I'm glad you say this, because I would disagree just a smidge on Senator Hawley's legislation and how it's been written. I know that again, given kind of the AI task forces right now, I often take kind of a different view, at least in how we regulate it, although I think we have to take a look at it. More important, though, no matter whether we're debating certain kinds of regulation at the local, state, federal level, the resources that it's taking, the ethical questions, whether or not you believe that it's going to be Skynet, the Matrix, take us all over, or you think it's just going to be, as I believe, Microsoft Office 3.0.
Oh gosh.
Then we'll talk about that another time. We'll set up another chat for that. I'm encouraged that on the general right, what we're seeing is a desire to actually rectify a lot of this ancient policy and remove a lot of these loopholes that are, again, giving China the ability to, as you've put it in a lot of your research and a lot of your policy analysis, stick a crowbar into the American birthright collapse and leech off of it to possibly engage in the worst foreign espionage and sabotage in a level that we've never seen. God forbid there's any kind of conflict. And even at the lowest, undermine the American benefit system to make money off of the United States care systems while still pledging allegiance to Beijing.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, too, we're not just talking about tools or machines or crops. We're talking about human lives, children. And the reality is that we have no idea who those children are, what happens to them, or where they go. The moment they leave the U.S. with the parents who have purchased them, we have no idea what's happening to them. And it's not that we think that all or even most foreign internationals using surrogacy are bad people. It's the fact that it's completely irresponsible to create and sell human beings through surrogacy that we then have no oversight over, who could then be used for better and for worse and placed in terrible abusive situations or not. We have no idea. And at the end of the day, it's the human person angle that even sets this apart from our other debates around things like crops or sensitive information or research, right? It's that as important as those things are, the human child is even greater value here that we should be concerned about.
I mean, not to pull a particular way overused quote, and in this case, believe it or not, from Jurassic Park, but it's the Jeff Goldberg, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, if you're going to write legislation, you enable people to be careless in a way that really violates the rights of humans. Emma Waters, Heritage Foundation, phenomenal policy analyst over at the Center for Technology and the Human Person. Guys, this is huge research for the modern age, stuff that is going to impact you, again, far more than, well, we, of course, love our other colleagues and some of the other pillar groups. But hey, you know, some of these things, a lot of loopholes for a lot of damage. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, just here at the end, you know, just a little bonus tonus side of things. I want to do a little bit of mail time. So here's how mail time works. I've actually gotten a couple of questions, as have my crew, about why, like how we actually do mail times. How is it ranked and ordered? The answer is you can throw comments, questions like that. Every show's got to have a user feedback segment. You can throw those into the chat. The best way, though, to get a hold of us, though, over in our Discord, which there's a link to in the description. You can click on that link, presto hesto. You are good to go, and there's a little mail time channel. Those get first priority. And then also over on the website, and that's on the bottom of the screen, it'll scroll across, TonyKinnett.com, TonyKinnett.com. There's a little contact tab. And then we just kind of go through them as we get them, and we try to keep abreast of them. So from this evening, and a few of these do kind of mix in with the last little bit of news that we have to get into, which there is some still to touch before we sign off. This one from Lisa. This was back on the 9th, but it's still relevant. She said, Tony, still wondering why you think John Thune is stalling on the Save America Act. Also, why are we no longer seeing any news about ICE protests in Portland, Chicago, or Minnesota? Surely ICE is still deporting, right? Well, the second question is a lot easier to answer than the first one. So the second answer is the leadership changed. Tom Homan's veteran law enforcement. He knows how to do things that run circles around the angry left. He's good at it. Kristi Noem is like, oh, you're going to fight? Well, then we're going to send in all the cameras and I'm just going to be really loud. And that wasn't helpful. And also, when you don't have man-whore Corey Lewandowski, the homewrecker, ordering people around like he has any idea after getting fired by Trump the first time. Now he's been fired by Trump twice. Yeah, I mean, it turns out that makes things worse and kind of makes a spectacle of things. So, you know, that side and said, that's why there's not a lot of protests and things going on right now. Homan's just better at it. Also, to answer your first question, why is he stalling? He says he doesn't have the numbers. I don't think that he really knows what to do, because being a leader of the House or the Senate requires you do some compromise and brokering. But when it actually comes to get things through and shove things forward, well, then you get men worrying about their legacies and essentially finding out that there are some, like Todd Young of Indiana, I do believe that he's going to end up supporting what the Republican caucus does. You know, he'll futz and kind of complain at times, but he'll eventually say, yeah, and then vote alongside and get it through. But when it comes to some of the others, I think it need to be made public. You got some complaints, you got some problems. Well, then step up, stand and deliver. Tell us why you don't want to do this in front of the public. Instead of hearing Barrasso stand up there and say what we all know, Mr. President of the Senate, well, of course, we all agree. Instead of that, tell me why you're not in favor of the walking filibuster. Tell me, maybe you have a good argument. But I deserve to hear it as an American, I think. So that's my particular take on that. Next question, also, again, giving the Discord crew kind of first dibs here. From Matt, keeping Azorius Tactical, he asks, regarding your comments on the lack of housing, wouldn't the massive increase in inflation thanks to the pandemic have any impact on the price of materials? Well, yes, absolutely. The price of materials has gone up. The price of labor has gone up. But supply, which is, of course, affected by said inflation, the supply was already struggling to begin with. The cinch point, the clinching point, was that a lot of people got into mortgages that were too good for them to then move out of those starter homes. So a lot of the people who aren't able to afford a house used to be able to buy their first house as a starter house. And, you know, in a lot of blue cities, they've been burnt down or they're in awful neighborhoods. And then kind of in the rest of the country, a lot of them have been bought up and are rented out, which is a problem. And then a lot of them have been taken by people who are still living in that mortgage at a 2% interest rate. I am one of those. So that's that particular line in there. So yes, the answer is yeah, the cost of supplies going up. Now this is where you increase supply and then wages rise and then you end up in a pretty decent place. But Biden didn't increase supply anywhere, anytime, anyhow. So that, at least in the housing sector, that was kind of an issue. It's one of the reasons why Trump came in with such a heavy hammer regarding, for example, the Canadian lumber industry. From all of the fools who still believe that cutting down trees reduces a ton of oxygen production on the earth or some nonsense, whatever the stupidity was going on in the environmental movements of the 70s. All right, next questions. These are from the YouTube chat this evening. An interesting question for sure. So this is from Pete Sake. Nice. So what does the average citizen get? Why is gas starting to go through the roof? Well, because 20% of the world's petroleum flows through the Strait of Hormuz. And if ships are too scared to sail openly through the Strait of Hormuz, then the total amount of oil around the globe is going to decrease a little bit. So the price is going up while Iran is firing the last of its crap into the Strait of Hormuz. That would be the answer. Now, there's a follow-up question to that by a different individual. This is from Pocket Marmo, a little saltier, but we are not fighting Iran anymore. We're fighting Iran and Russia. Do Trump stooges understand this? 4 question marks. So this is the Iranian talking point, which is a little bizarre. Interesting. They appointed a new president because, the last one was, So the new Iranian president, brand new, freshly minted. I actually think we have his little statement of excitement ready to go. It's in the B-roll footage. Let me see if I can find it here for you. Might have to scroll through a few images here. That's Iran's ballistic missile capacity. And there we go. His name is Masoud Pezeshkian Shaganistan. So Masoud Pezeshkian, he says in a brand new tweet. Again, I didn't even know that they found the new president. It's exciting. But anyway, talking to leaders of Russia and Pakistan, I reaffirmed Iran's commitment to peace in the region. Yeah, okay. LOL. The only way to end this war, ignited by the Zionist regime and the United States, is recognizing Iran's legitimate rights, to slaughter people and beat and as Al Khamenei said, rape women who are in prison before they're executed so they can't go to heaven. That would be Al Khamenei himself who said that, the legitimate rights. Payment of reparations. Okay. And then firm international guarantees against future aggression. Okay. Okay, sailor. That's real special. Now, Russia and China have given a nice firm see ya to Iran. I was told, and you were told, that Russia was going to sail like a fleet to the Strait of Hormuz and protect it. That didn't happen. Russia's buying drones from Iran. The drones aren't coming anymore. Russia's very, 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 very awkwardly trying to find a way out of this. And the Trump administration is trying to essentially use this as a lever to end the Russo-Ukrainian war, if they can. So, no, we're not fighting Russia at the same time. Not in that way. I mean, maybe in like a market lever way, sure. I mean, if you have some sources about Russian military doing things other than cowering whenever a U.S. naval ship goes by all means, please share. So far, just, pretending, the Iranian presidential line. Okay, thanks for sharing. Next question. Also, again, a couple of really, really good ones here from our very dear YouTube channel member, Hermetic Signal. Why is it that Trump is one of the only Republicans with any courage? With any courage? The answer to that question is he's not. But he is the executive of the United States, and the executive, here's a little dirty secret that FDR kind of screwed up. So Woodrow Wilson did not want to be president, he wanted to be king. Let's be very clear. Woodrow Wilson wanted to be president, and then he wanted to be king. Edith Wilson, who was president as Woodrow Wilson was, dead, kept a lot of that stuff in power. And then FDR, who was taking notes, then brought about one of the greatest expansions of federal agencies since Woodrow Wilson and essentially made the United States not a constitutional republic, but essentially a pseudo-republican monarchy. And so the president of the United States had power to issue executive orders. Exciting. And executive orders are like laws, but Congress hasn't passed them yet. And there are a few things that are off limits for executive orders, but if you declare a national emergency, well then, you're good to go. Hey, fantastic. You can do whatever you want as long as Congress or the Supreme Court doesn't intervene and say, well, the Constitution literally explicitly says don't touch this. So presidents since FDR have been ratcheting up the executive order shenanigan fest. Now, Clarence Thomas from the Supreme Court points out this really started ratcheting up during, you guessed it, the Jimmy Carter administration. And ever since then, we've essentially been living in the power of the pen and the phone, as Obama put it. And that sucks. Well, that means that the entire political system of the country really does rest on the president, which, by the way, is why no one comes out for elections that don't involve the president. Every administration, essentially, you have a new king who appoints new administrators, and then you have the Senate, which is the nobility class, and the House, which is kind of a pseudo-parliament, kind of. And that's how the United States is run. So it's not that Trump is the only one who has any courage. No. And also courage or being willing to do something tough does not in and of itself imply morality. You can swing a hammer. Sometimes that is going to, smash a nail. Sometimes that hammer is going to smash a baby. So, why is Trump one of the only ones who's willing to do so? Well, he has the chair. He has the political momentum to do things. So I know kind of a different answer to your question because, yeah, obviously the man does have courage. I mean, he took a bullet and then stood back up and yelled, fight, fight, fight. Clearly. The job of the president of the United States absolutely sucks. People who tell you they want that job are idiots. That's a terrible job. But that all said, I don't think he's the only Republican with any courage. I just think there are a lot of people who don't often recognize what time it is. And sometimes days getting a little bit darker and you kind of need to do some things effectively and not worry about political chess. While also at the same time not casting aside the political chessboard. You need both. The real dirty secret of the Republican Party is that the establishment and the populists and the traditional conservatives, that three core of group with some of the libertarians, all of them need each other. And this is something that the comments are not going to like, but it's the truth. I'm not going to lie to you. The establishment, aka the technocrats, people who believe that your skill in a position is more important than your ability to campaign or always do what's popular, that doesn't get along well with the populace who believe, oh, to hell if you need skills to do things, I'll run for school board. Who cares if I don't know how to balance a budget? I'm popular. And then it turns out that things suck, and then you have superintendents who resign because your board doesn't quite know what they're doing. I don't know what else to tell you. They need each other because establishmentarians get very out of touch with American people because when you're a technocrat sitting in your office, your eyes are on the books and not the people in front of you. Populists size around the people around them because they don't want to get lynched, but they're not on the books. And that's a problem. And so they need each other. The libertarians need the traditional conservatives because the traditional conservatives provide the morality to the party. Hey, maybe you shouldn't have affairs while you're in office, that kind of a thing. Hey, maybe we shouldn't execute children because it's convenient. That kind of policy needs to be paired with the libertarian perspective, which is you don't get to regulate firearms in the country just because there's a momentary measure of safety. These are paired dualities within the Republican Party. Both need each other. No one recognizes that. And this is also why you see Republicans are often very rarely divided on core fundamental issues. Because the average American voter understands this far more than we politicos do. I get in these weird echo chambers where I'm duking it out with kind of my equals or punching upwards my uppers in the political movement who I consider my opposites. So for example, I have a piece, I believe, coming out tomorrow over in the Daily Wire in which I roast a guy from Reason, the same one that I did during the show. The libertarian side, traditional conservative, little bit of friction with the libertarian side. Meanwhile, you have the populists who are arguing the populist Ken Paxton with Thune, the more establishmentarian. Now, that does produce something good. Cornyn, who now recognizes it's not just going to be a nice ice skating victory through to winning his seat to keep it, at least in the nomination for the Republican candidate for Senate in Texas. Well, he better get out there and endorse the walking filibuster. You'll notice that in the video that we made and Josiah edited with all of the Republicans who have not supported the walking filibuster, Cornyn's name's not on there. Cornyn came out today and endorsed the walking filibuster. That's what pressure does. So that's a very long answer, kind of, wrapping around to it. It's a weird thing. So the Democrats don't understand this because the progressives want to burn down the corporate side of the party. Well, they need the corporate side of the party. Nancy Pelosi is not a socialist. She's a corporatist. Well, you need the corporatists. And then they chucked out their populists. They chucked out the Bill Clinton populist party and threw them all over to the Republicans, which is why there's a rebalancing act going on right now. Anyway, good fun stuff in that particular side. Not exactly the question that was asked, but I don't know. Sometimes the Lord moves in mysterious ways, and so does my ADHD. Next question here on the mail time. Okay, rather interesting kind of criticism, but I'll take it anyway. You're supposed to be a, excuse me, this is from Auburn Man, F8N. The government is a liar, like you. Ooh, you're supposed to be a reporter. Use your brain. Okay. Every once in a while, I have to remind the general audience of this. Those that stop by who are newer, or, you just don't, maybe don't stick around for when I mention this. I am not a reporter. I have never been a reporter, ever. I have not. When I joined the political world, I was a commentator and a columnist for Lone Conservative. Then I founded the Chalkboard Review, and I was its executive director. And then I became an investigative columnist for the Daily Signal. That means I'm going to give you the news, then I'm going to give you my opinion and my analysis. Because I don't believe there's any such thing as an unbiased reporter, so why would I pretend to be one? And then I became the host of the show. My job title during the day, I'm the national correspondent. I analyze, make predictions. Hopefully there's a jar somewhere filled up with coins. The Tony Kinnett was right jar. That's what I base my credibility on. I'm not a reporter, but I do, in fact, criticize Republicans and Democrats. Those who watch the show know that I was thrilled and had called for Kristi Noem to be getting out of here way before she was actually given a sideways promotion. And then I also criticize the left. So just because I'm not repeating whatever Tucker Carlson is drooling onto the ground doesn't mean I'm not asking questions. Just because I don't have a Star of David shaped hole in my head that is turning me slowly insane doesn't mean I'm not asking questions about things. My questions just get results. Like, hey, the Epstein thing. Why don't we go after the financial connections and then take down the Clinton Foundation? Wow. Seems more useful than going, is everyone around me a pedophile? That's the kind of thing that people believe who talk to toasters. So, regarding that, I do in fact use my brain and read particular articles. I'd encourage you to do the same. And I wouldn't encourage any of you to make this your only source for news or analysis at all, in any way, shape, or form. So, critical mass systems. Tony is a journalist then? Oh no. Unfortunately, I think I have to probably say I'm in the journalism sphere, although I do hate it very, very, very much. So, alas, that is something that I probably have to, admit. There are a couple of things I wanted to mention because someone asked about it. After Abby Phillips on CNN made her pseudo apology that, oh yeah, maybe I should have mentioned, that the Muslim terrorist attack was a Muslim terrorist attack. She got out in front of everybody and lost her marbles. And a very, very bizarre situation. This was posted by the Media Research Center and our friends over there. Strange. It's Lydia Monahan over at the New York Post, good friend. Watch Abby Phillips react to, again, the trend of Islamic terror. Just watch how the Democrats cannot, for even a second, come to terms with some reality stuff in a way that the Republicans do quite often.
So I can't speak for Mike Johnson, but I would say we've had 2 terrorist attacks here in the last 10 days.
What does that have to do with Muslims?
So can we condemn those? Why are we?
Of course. What does that have to do with Muslims?
What does that have to do with Muslims?
Gee, what does that have to do with Muslims? So, as a fun aside here, I guarantee you that if there was a Baptist who went around and did one thing that was considered violent, every single aspect of Baptist theology would be examined, castigated, and criticized in the broad media. In fact, we are at a point when if it is just a straight white male, then all of the straight white males of any denomination or religion are immediately criticized. But if an individual or two individuals shout Allahu Akbar and chuck an IED at a group of protesters who were protesting against the Muslim culture influence in New York City, you say that has nothing to do with Muslims. Or the guy who was wearing the sweatshirt that said property of Allah. Now, by the way, the real conversation, if Abby Phillips wanted to be intelligent here in this particular instance, or honest, I'll take either one, she would say, hey, what do Muslims have? They have a responsibility to call out the more radical elements. If you don't want to be seen as radical because, you kind of like the momentum that's being brought forward here, well, then you need to say, no, I'm sorry, you're insane, you're crazy, and you're stupid. I don't want anything to do with you. This idea that we can never criticize people that are in our own camp is retarded. It's retarded. I don't want Marjorie Taylor Greene near me. She's retarded. I don't want her anyway. No. And then what did she immediately do as soon as she was criticized? She ran on The View and got crazy. But the left never does this with Islam. They never do this at all. Oh, they need to gatekeep the community. They'll never do so.
There is a radical strain of Islam that's led to these terrorist attacks. Obviously, the vast majority of Muslims are
people with terroristic ideologies.
Violent people with terroristic ideologies. So she's saying that there's this actual common core of terrorism. It's this very weird agnostic atheist take to these kind of things, where they believe that if you just get religiously fundamentally enough anywhere, that if you have a Quaker who's a radical Quaker, one day he's sitting in Pennsylvania, and then the next day, boom, he's donning the Quaker Oats hat and he's going around committing arson. That's not a thing. There are lots of religions, denominations, and cultures who, the more fundamental that you get into them, you don't get wildly radical and terroristy. There are a few, absolutely. Those that do, in fact, talk themselves into believing that violent needs are essential in order to accomplish that particular will. That's a facet of Islam. Now, you can sit here and pretend that there are, when you cite the Quran and the orders for violence, that's out of context or whatever. It's not. It is directly in context in the Quran when those verses are mentioned. Wherever in the surah you are, the context is always very, very clear. So again, you can talk about Muslims having a responsibility to hold particular individuals accountable. But the immediate relief say, well, you can't say anything like that because, then you would have to say that other cultures have responsibilities to call out, where are all the black community leaders in New York City? Those who literally hold events for the black community, who hold black pride marches in New York City, those whose titles on LinkedIn are black community leader. That is their title, not mine. Where are they after a string of black men attack Asian women at ATMs? The thing that happened during the Stop Asian Hate movement that suddenly disappeared it? Where was black men need to take responsibility? The only time you hear that is when Obama's telling them that they need to vote for a black woman because she's black and she's a woman. Once you start saying that culture groups, if you're going to define black as a culture, once you start identifying cultures having responsibility, well, then it actually becomes my job to say, you're not teaching Christian theology. Get out of here. You're making it up. You don't belong here. Get out of here. You don't deserve a seat at the table to tell us all about how actually there's some kind of goofy Zionist plot. Because 5 minutes ago you were an e-girl and now you want to say you're a theologian. How about no? It's very basic. Again, most Americans do absolutely understand these particular things. So I'd say here at 8:53, I'll take a stab at this last one here for fun. Ainla the Chanter said, the British government divided up the Middle East for who? The answer to that question is the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman, Sykes and Picot, the Brits and the French, made it quite clear, quite clear, that it was the Ottoman Empire who went back and completely changed the Sykes and Picot agreement to be carved into the awkward pseudo-ethnic regions that screwed over the Kurds. The idea that there was some kind of Jewish cabal in the UK, again, the reason you notice say the British government, you do realize that from Sykes and Picot, the other half of this was France in which there were no Jews of any sort that were anywhere involved, either in the financial institutions as are conspiracy theoried, or in the actual drafting of the Sykes-Picot agreement. We're going to sit here and pretend that there was no British Palestine, in which, again, in parentheses was called Israel across all the British maps before Sykes and Picot. It was a method of carving up the Middle East post-World War I in an effort to do so in a way that wasn't going to flare up the Ottoman Empire into this new Turkish group. There's a really good History Matters video on this that I would recommend, because everyone always forgets the Greeks. Everyone always forgets the Greeks. The Greeks wanted and deserve a huge portion of Turkey. The Azerbaijanis deserve a portion of Turkey. And the Kurds, again, the most screwed over group in the Middle East, other than, again, the people of Israel. The Kurds were supposed to get something. And the Ottoman Empire said no and threatened to rebel and throw all of Eastern Europe and Southwest Asia and the Middle East into a major war that the British couldn't afford because they were broke. I mean, there's a fun joke that the Great Depression at 10 years later didn't really hurt Britain because they were broke to begin with anyway. They didn't have time and effort and money and all of these goods to go around fighting additional wars. They were already dealing with India. But all the conspiracy theorist people, they like to pretend that in their weird tunnel vision that there's only the Jews and the billionaires. Those are the only people that exist. That's it. And everyone else are just, no one else. And to Rizal saying we're abandoning the Kurds in Syria, Tony, I absolutely agree. We are abandoning the Kurds in Syria. Wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. They are still the most screwed over group, and we're one of the groups that screwed them over. It's why I do not believe that George H.W. Bush is the phenomenal president that he is often portrayed as by, again, the establishmentarians. But alas, to the point that I was making, regarding the Middle East in general, the idea that no one else has any agency except for the United States and Israel, who are to blame for everything, that's stupid. That's stupid. All of the different groups have agency. This is why when we're talking about early American history, we point out that the Native American tribes often conquered, raped, stole from each other. My tribe, the Deer Clan of the Cherokee, included. Everyone participated. Everyone has agency. These factors matter. Now, that said, hope you guys have a stellar Wednesday evening, a good hump day. Be in prayer for those who are, I'm not be in prayer like I'm your pastor telling you to be in prayer. I would encourage you to be in prayer over the tornado victims, the storms which have scoured the Midwest, the upper Northwest from me, and then, of course, a little bit south as well. Keep those folks in your prayers as well. FEMA is not funded right now, and so a lot of federal emergency management assistance that would be coming through is probably less ready to do so because that's under the Department of Homeland Security. That said, have an excellent evening. We'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.